The air inside the packed gymnasium hummed with anticipation. Families filled every row of bleachers. Proud smiles stretched across their faces as the graduating class of Lincoln High prepared to step onto the stage. Balloons bobbed, banners hung with the bold letters Class of 2025, and camera flashes lit up the space like fireflies. But amid the sea of joy and expectation, one man sat quietly in the back row, shoulders squared, hands folded, eyes unwavering. His name was Daniel Brooks. Daniel wasn't like the other parents. His clothes were plain, worn at the seams, the calluses on his hands betraying years of hard labor. He was a single father, raising his son alone after tragedy had hollowed out the life he once knew. The faint scars on his arms and the rigid way he held himself were echoes of a past no one here would guess at. A past steeped in silence, discipline, and blood. For Daniel had once been part of something larger, something shadowed and unspoken. But that was long ago, and tonight was not about him. Tonight was about his son. Ethan. The boy was the one light Daniel had held onto through nights of loneliness and mornings of aching fatigue. He had worked 2 jobs, sweeping floors by day, cleaning offices by night, just to put food on the table, just to keep Ethan's dreams alive. And now, sitting there as the principal's voice boomed through the microphone, Daniel's chest swelled with pride. His boy was about to walk across that stage and receive his diploma. A moment he had promised himself he would never miss. But as the students lined up, Daniel noticed something. A pair of men in dark uniforms weaving through the crowd. Security. Their eyes swept the bleachers with clinical precision, and their radios buzzed with clipped words. At first, he ignored it. Big events like this always had extra guards. Yet, unease prickled his skin when their gaze locked onto him. One whispered something into his radio, and both began moving directly toward him. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Sir," one of the guards said when they reached his row, voice low but firm. "We're going to need you to step outside with us." Confused murmurs rippled around as nearby parents turned to watch. Daniel straightened slowly. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice calm but edged with steel. "Just come with us, please," the other guard insisted. "This won't take long." Daniel's gut clenched. He glanced at the stage, where Ethan waited nervously for his name to be called. His son's eyes darted toward him, catching the sudden tension. The boy's face fell. "No," Daniel said firmly, shaking his head. "Not tonight. My son's graduating. I'm not going anywhere." The guards exchanged a look, their patience thinning. "Sir, if you don't comply, we'll have to remove you." The air thickened. Parents whispered, some pulling out phones to record. Daniel could feel the heat of humiliation burning under his skin. He hadn't done anything wrong. He had come here like everyone else. A father proud of his child. Yet here he was, being asked to leave as if he were a threat, an intruder. He leaned closer to the nearest guard, voice low enough for only them to hear. "I've faced worse men than you, son. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." The guard stiffened, his hand brushing near his belt. A ripple of unease swept the section. Ethan's name was called over the loudspeaker, his cue to step forward. But instead, his eyes searched desperately for his father. And what he saw was heartbreak. Daniel, standing his ground as 2 men boxed him in, ready to drag him away before he could witness his boy's moment. "Dad!" Ethan's voice cracked across the gym, raw and frightened. The room fell silent. Daniel's heart twisted. He couldn't let this happen. Not here, not now. But before the guards could move, another sound cut through the tension. A slow, deliberate clap from the entrance of the gymnasium. Heads turned. 6 men walked in, each moving with quiet authority, their presence unmistakable even in civilian clothes. Broad shoulders, piercing eyes, steps too disciplined to belong to ordinary spectators. The crowd shifted uneasily, sensing something more. Daniel froze. Recognition flashed in his eyes. These were not strangers. These were ghosts from a past he had buried deep, men he hadn't seen in years. Navy SEALs, his brothers in arms. And they had come for him. The gymnasium, moments ago filled with celebration, now pulsed with unspoken tension. No one knew why 6 men with the bearing of warriors had entered a high school graduation, but every parent and student could feel the shift in the air. Something extraordinary was about to unfold. The guards, suddenly aware of how outmatched they were, hesitated. Their grip on authority faltered as the 6 SEALs moved closer, forming a silent wall behind Daniel. The message was clear. Without a word being spoken, he was not alone. Ethan's eyes widened in awe, his diploma trembling in his hand. He had never seen this side of his father, never glimpsed the shadows of the man who now stood protected by warriors. The silence stretched, heavy and electric, until one of the SEALs spoke. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of command. Is there a problem here? The question hung in the air like a blade suspended by a thread. The lead guard swallowed hard, his earlier authority cracking beneath the weight of the 6 men who now stood before him. He shifted uneasily, his hand still resting near his belt but his confidence faltering. No problem. He muttered quickly, though the tightness in his voice betrayed his nerves. We were just following protocol. The SEAL who had spoken, tall, with eyes sharp as flint, took a step forward. His name was Cole Maddox, and though the crowd didn't know him, Daniel did. Memories rushed back, deserts and jungles, nights where silence meant survival, missions carried out in shadows. Cole wasn't just any man. He had been Daniel's commanding officer once upon a time. Protocol? Cole asked, his voice steady but cutting. Your protocol includes dragging a father out of his son's graduation. The gym was silent, every spectator caught between curiosity and unease. Some filmed, whispering, while others simply clutched their children closer, sensing the depth of something far beyond high school pageantry. The guard cleared his throat. We were told he doesn't belong here. His eyes flicked toward Daniel, almost apologetic now. Doesn't belong. The words struck like a knife. Daniel clenched his fists at his sides, his chest burning with humiliation. For years he had carried himself quietly, never asking for recognition, never speaking of the things he had endured. And yet, here he was, branded an outsider in the one place he wanted to feel at home. Cole's jaw tightened. You're mistaken. He didn't need to raise his voice. Authority lived in his tone, in his posture. In the unflinching way he stared down the guards. Behind him, the other 5 SEALs stood like immovable statues, their silent solidarity more intimidating than any weapon. Gentlemen, Cole said finally, you're dismissed. The guards faltered. One looked around, searching for backup, but none came. With hundreds of eyes watching, their dominance crumbled. They exchanged a reluctant glance, then turned sharply and left the gymnasium, their radios crackling as they disappeared down the hallway. A murmur rose through the bleachers, buzzing like a hive of confusion. Some whispered admiration, others suspicion. But all eyes now turned back to Daniel. Daniel, who stood in the middle of it all, his secret past bleeding into the present. Ethan still clutched his diploma on stage, trembling but unwilling to move. His eyes locked on his father, wide with questions he had carried for years. Questions Daniel had never answered. Cole turned, his gaze softening as he studied his old comrade. You didn't tell him, did you? He asked quietly, though everyone around could hear. Daniel's throat tightened. He shook his head once, his voice rough. He doesn't need to know. But Ethan's voice broke through the tension, sharp with emotion. Know what, Dad? The room stilled again. Parents leaned forward. Students craned their necks. It was no longer just a graduation. It was a stage where a truth buried for decades threatened to break free. Daniel exhaled, the weight of years pressing against his chest. He had never wanted this. He had never wanted Ethan to see him as anything other than a father, flawed but present. The scars, the sleepless nights, the shadows in his eyes, they were burdens he had chosen to carry alone. Cole stepped closer, his words low but resolute. Maybe it's time, brother. Maybe he deserves to know who raised him. Ethan's grip on the diploma tightened until his knuckles whitened. His voice trembled, filled with equal parts fear and hope. Dad, who are you? Daniel's eyes burned. He glanced at the SEALs, at the men who had once been his brothers. And then at his son, standing vulnerable before him. The moment stretched, heavy with decision. He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, the gym doors banged open again. This time it wasn't guards. It was a man in a suit, sharp-eyed, authoritative, flanked by 2 more security officers. His presence commanded attention, his voice slicing through the noise. Mr. Brooks, he said, scanning Daniel with a mixture of recognition and disdain. We need to talk. Now, the SEALs instinctively shifted, stepping closer to Daniel, forming a protective wall. The man in the suit raised a hand. Stand down. This isn't your concern. Cole's eyes narrowed. Anything involving him is our concern. The crowd buzzed louder, whispers swelling into confusion. Some teachers on stage tried to restore order, urging parents to stay calm, but the spectacle had already consumed the room. Ethan, heart pounding, looked between his father, the mysterious SEALs, and the man in the suit. For the first time in his life, he realized his dad was more than just the janitor who worked long nights to put food on the table. There was something deeper, something dangerous, something extraordinary. Daniel finally spoke, his voice low and trembling with suppressed fury. Not here. Not tonight. Whatever you think you need from me, you'll wait. My son deserves this moment. The man in the suit smirked faintly, though his eyes carried a warning. This isn't over, Brooks. You can't hide forever. He turned sharply and exited, his security detail trailing him. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then, slowly, applause began to ripple through the bleachers. First a few parents, then more, until the entire gym erupted in thunderous clapping and cheers. Not for the graduates this time, but for Daniel, for the father who had refused to be broken, for the man who stood proud despite the shadows of his past. Ethan, tears streaming freely now, ran down from the stage, diploma still in hand. He reached his father and threw his arms around him, clutching tightly. I don't care who you were, he whispered through his sobs. You're my dad. That's enough. Daniel's arms wrapped around his son, trembling, his heart shattering and mending all at once. Behind them, the 6 SEALs stood silently, their expressions solemn. As if they knew this was only the beginning of a storm none of them could escape. The gymnasium slowly emptied after the applause faded. Though the whispers lingered like smoke, parents tugged their children away, glancing over their shoulders, as if they had just witnessed something they weren't supposed to. Teachers herded graduates toward the back to collect their gowns. Their voices uncertain, their smiles forced. Daniel stood in the center of it all, still holding Ethan close. The boy's tears had dampened his shirt, and Daniel's own eyes burned with unshaded emotion. He wanted to freeze this moment, to keep Ethan in the circle of his arms, away from questions, away from danger. But reality had a cruel way of intruding. Cole cleared his throat softly. Daniel, he said, his tone measured, we need to talk. Somewhere private. Daniel looked up, meeting the eyes of his old commander. Behind him, the other SEALs lingered with the patience of men used to waiting out storms. Each face was familiar, etched with memories of battles long past. Faces he hadn't expected to see again in this lifetime. Ethan pulled back slightly, wiping his eyes. What's going on? Who are you? His voice cracked, but it was no longer just fear, it was desperate hunger for truth. Daniel brushed a hand across his son's hair, the same way he had when Ethan was small. Not here, son. He whispered. Not where everyone's watching. Cole nodded. Already moving toward the side exit of the gym. Follow us. The night air outside was cool, heavy with the scent of fresh cut grass. The stadium lights still glowed from the ceremony, but here, in the shadowed parking lot, everything felt quieter, darker. The 6 SEALs formed a loose circle around Daniel and Ethan, their movements instinctive, protective. Daniel finally spoke. His voice low but steady. Why now? After all these years, why show up here? Cole studied him, his expression unreadable. Because you can't run from what you are, Daniel. And neither can we. Ethan looked between them, frustration spilling over. Stop talking in riddles. Somebody tell me what's going on. The youngest of the SEALs, a broad-shouldered man with a scar across his cheek, crouched slightly to meet Ethan's eyes. Kid, your father isn't who you think he is. He's more. Ethan shook his head, confused. More. He's just my dad. He cleans schools. He fixes things. He's tired all the time. That's who he is. Daniel's chest ached. He wanted to keep that version alive, the ordinary, wary father who scraped by for his son. But the truth pressed harder now, refusing to stay buried. I wasn't always a janitor. Daniel admitted, his voice heavy. Before you were born, I was part of a unit. The kind you don't hear about on the news, the kind that doesn't exist on paper. We went places no one wanted to go. Did things no one wanted to admit. For years, I lived in the shadows. He swallowed hard. And I left it all behind when your mother died. I swore I'd never bring that world near you. Ethan's breath caught. His young face twisted with disbelief and awe. You were like them. He motioned toward the SEALs. Daniel nodded slowly. I was one of them. And more. But that life, it takes pieces of you. Pieces you can't ever get back. His voice faltered, his eyes distant as memories clawed at the edges of his mind. Cole stepped in, firm but not unkind. You were one of the best, Daniel. We didn't survive half those missions because of luck. We survived because you were there. But Daniel shook his head, pain flickering across his face. Don't do that. Don't drag me back with praise. I walked away for a reason. Ethan's eyes brimmed with new tears, though they were different from before. So that's why those guards came after you. Because of what you used to be. Cole's gaze hardened. Not exactly. The man in the suit, He knows who your father is. And if he's here, it means something's moving. Something dangerous. They want him back, or they want him out of the way. Daniel's fists clenched. He had spent years living small, blending into the cracks, hoping the world had forgotten him. But the shadows had long memories, and now they had reached into the one moment he wanted untouched. Ethan's voice trembled as he asked, "Dad, are we in danger?" Daniel crouched, gripping his son's shoulders tightly. "Listen to me, Ethan. No matter what happens, I will never let anyone hurt you. You are the reason I've kept going. You are the reason I left that life behind. And if it comes for us again." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Then I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe." With the seal with the scar straightened, scanning the dark edges of the lot. "Then you'd better be ready. Because if they know where you are, they won't stop." Cole stepped closer, his voice quieter now. "We didn't just come to back you up at a graduation, Daniel. We came because we got wind of something. Intel says someone inside the government is cleaning house. Eliminating old assets. People like us. People like you." Daniel's stomach dropped. Old ghosts. Hunting the living. He had always feared this day, but hearing it aloud sent a chill down his spine. "Then you should have stayed away," he said bitterly. "Bringing you here only paints a bigger target on my back." Cole's eyes flared. "We don't abandon our own. Not then, not now. If they're coming after you, they're coming after all of us." The words rang heavy in the cool night air. Ethan stood frozen, caught between pride and fear, struggling to reconcile the man who had tucked him in at night with the warrior the world had nearly erased. Daniel rubbed his face with one hand, weariness sinking into his bones. "I wanted a normal life for him. That's all I ever wanted." Cole's voice softened, almost regretful. "Normal isn't in your cards, brother. It never was." From the far side of the parking lot, headlights suddenly flared to life. Engines rumbled. Multiple vehicles rolled slowly toward them, dark silhouettes that promised nothing good. The SEALs instantly shifted formation, instincts sharp, their bodies coiled for action. Daniel pulled Ethan behind him, heart pounding, old reflexes waking from the grave. The storm had found them. The vehicles crept closer, their engines humming like predators circling prey. Headlights swept across the parking lot, washing over Daniel and the SEALs in harsh, blinding beams. The air thickened with anticipation, the kind that coils in the gut before violence erupts. Ethan clutched his father's arm, his knuckles white. "Dad, who are they?" he whispered, his voice cracking with fear. Daniel didn't answer immediately. His eyes were locked on the approaching convoy. 3 black SUVs, windows tinted so dark they mirrored the stadium lights. Every instinct he had buried for years screamed at him, this wasn't just intimidation. This was a move. A test. A warning. Cole's voice cut through the tension. "Positions." The SEALs shifted with fluid precision, spreading into a protective arc around Daniel and Ethan. Their movements were silent, practiced, the kind of coordination born only of years spent trusting one another in hell. The first SUV screeched to a halt. Its back door opened, and out stepped the same man in the tailored suit. His polished shoes clicked against the asphalt as he walked forward, flanked by 2 heavily built men who carried themselves like enforcers rather than security. "Mr. Brooks." The man called. His tone smooth, calculated. "You're making quite the spectacle tonight." Daniel kept his body between the man and Ethan. "You should have left when you had the chance," he growled. The man smiled thinly. "I could say the same to you. But you and I both know there's no leaving the past behind. Not for men like you." His gaze slid toward Cole and the other SEALs. "And certainly not for them." Cole's jaw clenched. "State your business." The man in the suit spread his hands as if in peace, though the gesture reeked of manipulation. "Simple. We have a program, a list, old operatives once useful, now liabilities. Mr. Brooks's name came up near the top. But I am not unreasonable. Cooperate with us, and perhaps we find a way to let him live out his days quietly." "Cooperate how?" Daniel demanded, his voice low, controlled. "Information. Access, leverage." The man's eyes glinted. "We know you still have it. The files, the knowledge of operations that were never meant to see daylight. Hand it over, and this ends tonight." Daniel's blood ran cold. Those files, the ones he had carried out when he left, weren't just information. They were proof. Proof of missions erased from history, of betrayals buried under classified stamps. He had locked them away years ago, swearing never to touch them again. He had told himself it was for Ethan's safety. But deep down, he knew one day they would come back to haunt him. Cole stepped forward, his presence radiating threat. "You're not touching him. Not tonight, not ever." The man in the suit tilted his head, amused. "Ah, loyalty. Admirable, but misplaced. Tell me, Commander Maddox, do you really think you can protect him from an entire machine designed to erase men like you?" The SEAL with the scar barked a short laugh. "We've faced worse machines than yours." The man's smile faded. He gave a small nod and the other SUV's doors swung open. Men poured out. 10, maybe 12, dressed in tactical gear. Their movements crisp and efficient. Their weapons gleamed under the parking lot lights. Ethan's breath hitched. "Dada." Daniel grabbed his son's shoulders, forcing him to meet his eyes. "Listen to me, Ethan. Stay behind me. Do not move until I tell you. Do you understand?" Tears welled in Ethan's eyes, but he nodded, his body trembling. The first of the armed men stepped forward. Rifles raised. The gym's distant chatter seemed to vanish into the night, leaving only the echo of boots on pavement and the thrum of danger pressing down on them. Cole gave a sharp command, his voice like steel. "Form tight. No one gets through." The SEALs shifted seamlessly, forming a shield in front of Daniel and Ethan. 6 against 12. The odds weren't good, but numbers had never dictated victory for men like them. The man in the suit lingered behind his soldiers, confident, detached. "Last chance, Brooks. Hand over what I want, or I let my men take you apart right here. Your boy will watch." Something inside Daniel snapped. Years of restraint, years of silence, years of hiding who he was. All of it cracked open. His eyes blazed as he stepped forward, no longer the weary janitor, no longer the broken father. In that moment, the warrior returned. "You touch him," Daniel said, his voice a growl that carried across the lot. "And I swear you'll regret ever learning my name." The man smirked, giving the faintest signal with his hand. The tactical men moved. Gunmetal flashed under the lights, boots pounded the asphalt, and the night erupted. The SEALs surged forward, their movements a brutal ballad of precision and force. Fists met rifles, boots met ribs. Shadows collided in vicious silence broken only by grunts and the crack of impact. One man swung a rifle butt toward Cole, but the commander slipped the strike, driving his elbow into the attacker's throat. Another SEAL disarmed his opponent with a brutal twist, sending the weapon skittering across the lot before slamming the man to the ground. Daniel shoved Ethan behind a car, shielding him with his body, but his instincts refused to let him stay still. One of the armed men broke past the circle, charging toward them. Daniel lunged, intercepting him with a force born of desperation. He caught the man's wrist mid-swing, twisted, and drove his fist into the man's jaw with enough power to drop him instantly. Ethan's eyes widened in shock. "Dada." Daniel didn't look back. He grabbed the fallen rifle, slinging it away before more blood could stain the night. Around him, the fight raged, brutal and unrelenting. The SEALs fought like men who had nothing left to lose, their bodies weapons honed by years of survival. But the numbers pressed hard, and for every man they dropped, another closed in. The man in the suit watched it all with eerie calm, his hands folded behind his back. He didn't flinch, didn't blink. He simply observed, as though everything unfolding was part of a design he had long ago calculated. Daniel felt the old fire coursing through his veins. The janitor was gone. The veteran was back. But as the fight wore on, one truth became undeniable: this was only the beginning. The parking lot was chaos. Grunts, shouts, and the crash of bodies against metal echoed under the harsh glow of the stadium lights. Parents still lingering near the gym had fled at the first sign of violence, leaving abandoned cars and half-spilled bags in their wake. The once proud graduation banners fluttered uselessly in the night breeze, their celebration drowned by the violence erupting just a few yards away. Daniel's chest heaved as adrenaline surged through him. He blocked a swing, countered with a strike to the ribs, and shoved his attacker into the hood of a car. His body remembered movements his mind had tried to forget. Every twist, every strike, every ounce of controlled brutality honed through years in the field. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for Ethan. "Dad." Ethan's voice cracked as he crouched behind the car, hands over his ears, eyes wide with terror. The sound cut Daniel deeper than any wound could. He had promised himself his boy would never see this side of him. And now, here it was, unleashed in full view. "Stay down." Daniel barked, his voice raw. He swung at another attacker, catching the man in the throat, then pivoted, his boot slamming into the side of a knee with a sickening crack. Cole and the other SEALs fought like demons. Their formation was fluid, each one covering the other, their years of shared bloodshed shining through. Two of them moved in tandem, taking down three armed men with surgical precision. Another used the SUV itself as cover, dragging an opponent into the door and finishing him with a crushing elbow. But the enemy kept coming. They weren't amateurs. Their tactics were sharp, their intent clear: overwhelm, capture, destroy. The man in the suit finally spoke again, his voice carrying over the clash. "You see, Brooks. This is pointless. You and your friends might delay the inevitable, but the machine never stops. You can't win against what you helped build." Daniel growled, throwing his attacker to the ground. "I built nothing for you." "Oh, but you did," the man replied smoothly, his smirk cutting like a blade. "Every mission, every ghost story, every operation buried in shadows, it all fed into this. You thought you escaped. You only made yourself valuable." A sudden gunshot cracked the air. Not from the SEALs, not from Daniel, but from one of the enforcers who had broken free of the melee. The bullet ripped across the lot, shattering a car window dangerously close to Ethan. Daniel's world narrowed. His heart lurched as he saw his son flinch, shards of glass slicing across his cheek. "No!" Daniel roared, a sound ripped from somewhere primal. He surged forward with terrifying speed, tackling the gunman to the ground. His fists rained down like thunder until the man was still, unconscious or worse. Breathing hard, Daniel glanced back at Ethan. The boy was shaking, tears streaming, blood trickling from a shallow cut on his face. Their eyes met, and for the first time, Ethan saw not just his father, but the warrior he had been hiding all along. Cole's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "Fall back, regroup at the north exit." The SEALs tightened their circle, pushing the remaining attackers back with relentless force. Daniel grabbed Ethan, pulling him into his arms. "Hold on, son," he whispered, his voice breaking. They moved together, the SEALs carving a path through the chaos. Bodies dropped, weapons clattered. The night became a blur of motion and violence. Finally, with a final shove, they broke free from the melee and spilled into the darker stretch of the campus. Away from the floodlights and into shadow. Breathing ragged, Daniel set Ethan down, crouching to check the cut on his son's face. His hands trembled as he wiped away the blood. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I never wanted this for you." Ethan's lips quivered. "Dad, I didn't know you were." His voice cracked, unable to finish. Daniel's throat tightened. "You weren't supposed to. You were supposed to have a life better than mine. But I can't hide it anymore. Not when they've come this far." Cole knelt beside them, scanning the perimeter. "Wood bought some time, but not much. They'll regroup. That man in the suit, he won't stop until he has what he wants." Daniel's eyes darkened. "Then we finish this. Tonight." The Cole studied him. "You sure? Once you step back in, there's no going back to the quiet life." Daniel looked at Ethan, his boy, trembling but brave. His diploma still clutched desperately in his hand. And in that moment, Daniel knew there was no choice. "They already took the quiet life from me," he said. "Now we fight." The SEAL with the scar spat on the ground, a feral grin spreading across his face. "About damn time." But Ethan's small voice broke through the hardened resolve. "Dade, if you fight them, do you come back? Or do I lose you too?" Daniel froze, the question tearing into him. His whole life had been built around one promise: to never let his son feel abandoned. And now, standing on the edge of war, that promise trembled. He pulled Ethan close, pressing his forehead against his son's. "You won't lose me," he whispered fiercely. "Not tonight. Not ever. Whatever it takes, I'll be here." Cole stood, his voice grim. "Then let's move. We take the fight to them before they come again." From the distance, the sound of engines revving echoed through the night, followed by the faint bark of radios. The machine was already regrouping, already hunting. Daniel rose, his hand gripping Ethan's shoulder with unyielding strength. The janitor was gone. The veteran was awake. The father was unbreakable. And the war for his son's future had just begun.